Thank you very much for joining me on the Voice of Job Seekers podcast. This is Mark. And of course, we want to get a hold of me. Want to know more about me? You can go to thevoiceofjobseekers.com. And of course, the podcast is found in your favorite podcast directory. This week, I am talking to Judith Humphrey, who's the author of the Job Seekers script. She's also a Fast Company contributor, has been doing so for a few years now. But you can also find her at judithhumphrey.com. And again, the book is called The Job Seeker Script, and you can find it on Amazon and many other platforms. But I want to welcome Judith and show. Thank you very
Yeah.
much for coming on. Now, I've got to give a little bit of the story of how I found you. I
Okay.
found you through your book, Impromptu. And it was perfect for me because I was doing more media interviews, I was doing more presentations, and I listened to my stuff in the past and I said, yikes. So, what that helped me to do is start being more diligent in my preparation, even if it's a 5-minute interview or if it's an hour interview, I go in a lot more prepared instead of relying on my memory and writing muscle to do all the work for me. So that makes things a lot easier. And I've been able to take that and translate that through other forms of communication. So that's really great. So when you told me that you were writing the book, or finishing on the book, The Job Seeker Script, I said, that makes a whole lot of sense. It's a natural progression
It is.
of someone's interested in being prepared as much as they possibly can to give the best presentation as possible. And interviewing is the presentation as well as networking and some of the other facets of the interaction where a job seeker is trying to present themselves as best as they possibly can. So it's not just limited to speeches and formal
No.
presentation.
In fact, you're really describing why I wrote the book and how I came to write the book, because for
Mm,
35 years, I built a company that taught leaders how to communicate
mm,
in their speeches, in their presentations, in their Q&A. And then I looked at the literature of job search and job seeking skills, and I realized this idea of preparation was really not part of the literature. And that if anybody wanted to be good in an interview, as you say, they have to prepare to be spontaneous. What Impromptu, the book said, and it is the centerpiece of this book, how to prepare to
mhm.
be superb in every interview, every email, every encounter.
Yeah. And I think you made a great point, and I think it's really important that adaptation is really a big thing now, where you're not just adapting to a particular workplace, and you have to also be ready to adapt to questions that people may have that you may not necessarily specifically prepare for.
Yes, that happens a lot. You can prepare for some questions. Oh, they're the old favorite questions. Tell me about yourself, which is not really a
Sure.
question anyway. But there'll be moments in an interview when you just are taken by surprise. Or somebody might say, when you think of nature, what kind of a tree are you like? That's a quirky. You can't prepare
Yeah.
for all of those. So my book is really for people who want to prepare for everything, not just the questions they know will come to them or the points that they'll be asked about, but it helps them prepare for the unexpected. Because in this book, as in the Impromptu book, there's a template for preparation and you burn it in your mind. I call it the higher template. Hook the audience, that is with a grabber. I inspire with a message, or reinforce that message with some proof points and
Right.
engage with your ending, which is really a call to action. So where do we go from here? So you
Right.
burn that in your mind, you burn that template in your mind, and you can say anything in any context.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that job seekers have to understand that when you say script, it's not necessarily a script for people to memorize, although there are things that they should want to memorize. But basically, they want to frame it in a way that will put themselves in the most positive light possible, right?
Exactly. Because the goal of any job seeker is to put himself or herself in the most positive light. And how do you do that? You can't do it impromptu. You can't think on the spot because when we think on the spot without the benefit of preparation, we get a little bit garbled, confused, sometimes
Mm.
frozen, or we just go on and on. So there are a lot of liabilities when it comes to going through an interview process without preparation. But as you
Right.
say, Mark, it's really good point. We're not looking to have people memorize their scripts verbatim because that would make them sound a bit wooden.
Yeah.
What the book teaches is that there's a pattern of organization in any response. And if you can organize your thoughts, you don't have to deliver them verbatim with every sentence you've written down, but you have a thought structure, a plan, an approach, and a message. And that means you can build your credibility script by script, situation by situation.
Sure. Speaking of which, let's use an example where somebody has a job gap. People are having those these days, and they've always had that. But in in the book, you do give and allude to some things that people can do. What would you say would be a 1 + 2 = 3 way for people to script a narrative when they've been out of a job for 6 months or maybe even longer or even shorter,
There are
maybe?
many ways. One way is to talk about the fact that they've left work in order to take care of the family or
Mhm.
elderly relative. Or maybe they wanted to pursue a new aspect of their career and they needed to take some courses. There's an example in the book that I think is really good. You want me to read it?
If we got a short
Very
paragraph to
short.
read.
Very
Yeah,
short.
okay,
So here it is.
okay.
The hook is I'm so glad you asked about this gap. In other words, you want to show that you're excited about what they said. Your inspiring messages. I took time off to be with my young children and upgrade my skills. Reinforce that message with I had time to nurture our 3 kids. I also received certification in social media marketing, which will help me in this new position. And I even became a facilitator for a group of mommy bloggers and helped several people reach audiences of over 500,000. So I'm recharged and ready for this next role. That's a script.
Right, no, and that's great. That's great. And people, again, the having the frameworks to think about from the book will be really helpful because really there's not a lot of content that's out there. There's a lot of how to answer the questions and answer in great detail. But basically, people just need a framework on how to present themselves and their experiences, not to
Yeah.
copy or emulate somebody else's.
That's true. There are a lot of examples out there, but there's not a methodology, there's not an approach that's consistent. And this approach will take people through every single stage of their job search, whether they're doing an elevator pitch, networking conversation, an internal pitch for a job. So you can operate with it if you want to rise within your present company, or it applies to the resume. There's a resume chapter in there, or a letter.
Mhm.
Thank you, Lynn. And every
Right.
aspect of an interview.
In the case of a networking narrative, what would be one of the two of the main strategies somebody can use when they're networking with someone? And mind you, I don't advocate anybody go to someone says, I want to network.
Game
That's
over.
kind of there are people who have done that too, which is really mind-boggling. But I think it's just a conversation, but I think it's a kind of conversation where you're hoping to exchange value, where you could be helpful to them and they can be helpful to you.
Well, you have to prepare for the networking conversations. Again, the book
Yes.
emphasizes that and uses some examples. And one example in the book is of a young woman who saw the person in the lunchroom that she wanted to have as her mentor. So she
Mhm.
walked over to her and said, "I'd love you to be my mentor. Can we set up a meeting?" And the senior woman said, "I don't have any time in my schedule. Tell me why you want me to mentor you." And there was dead silence. She hadn't prepared, and so she didn't know what to
Right.
say. So the beginning of networking, whether it's internally or externally, is to think about why you're approaching that person, what they have to offer you, and in a prepared script, note form script, write down the message you want to deliver, write down why you wanted to see this individual or what kind of help you would like, and then end with a positive next step message. So take it into the future. And whether it's, I'll send you my resume, or I look forward to this next meeting, or I appreciate your help. So it's very important to plan these conversations, even if they're with no and have had casual conversations with in a job search situation, really want to be prepared.
Yeah. And I think too, more specific your question is, the better it is for you. Your example of to say, I really like you to mentor me is really you're asking a larger question you think you are because people automatically so I don't have time to if you ask a little bit more specific question like how did you get from point A to point B, that's a little bit more easier to access for most people at that particular moment. So I
Right.
think that's it's a very wise decision to think what you really want to ask people if you were to meet someone.
Exactly.
Maybe they might be able to give you that one answer right on the spot. But ultimately, you want to make it appear that you're just taking a fraction of their very small fraction of their time. And should they give you more, then that's awesome. And
Exactly.
that people, but I think that's where the awareness and the forethought needs to be taken is that you got to think of how people are going to respond to you and the time that you're going to give them and the impression that you're going to give them too, because I'm sure they might have had if somebody really influential, they get asked all the time to be
They
mentored by that
do.
person.
I know I used to have people come to me and say they wanted to meet with me about a job, not a job I was
Mhm.
offering, but one that they were interested in. And they would start off with, "I wanna pick your brain," and that's
Yeah,
non-starter, 'cause it's as
yeah,
you say, it's too general. You what
yeah.
eh, if there's one message to take away from this session today, it's you always have to have a message, and you have to look at that message and say, "Is that the point I wanna get across here in this meeting?" And
Mhm.
if you can do that, then you're on your way to success. But so many people book meetings without really knowing what their point is. Or
Yeah, yeah, and they like clarity
yeah,
because
exactly.
they like or they know the big scheme, they want that job or they want the opportunity, but they don't realize that there are steps to get there, so you'll have to ask about the specific step. You'll get the more than likely, you'll get a warranted answer or at least that person's attention to be able to point you in the right direction.
It could be something like, I know you're I know you're well regarded in this firm, and I'd love to have your support for a position I'm applying for. That would be a message.
Yeah, that would be a message, and that's true for a lot of people. That's a good place to start. But even I think of even if people got more specific and more thoughtful about it, they get more of the response that they want. But that's a great place to start for
Yeah.
sure. Is that you're asking about a specific position, and you're ultimately want to lead to how do I get to that point? But you're not asking a broad-scaping, question that's gonna take a whole lot of time. Automatically, that person's gonna default, "I don't have that time."
Oh, exactly. But once you have your message as a starting point, then you have to say, "Okay, how can I get that across?" You talk
Yeah.
about in the case of the message we just talked about, you talk about the impact that person has on the company, or what you know about that individual and his success within the company and his contacts. And then you say, "It would mean so much to me if you would put in a word for me because the hiring manager really trusts your judgment," something like that. So as you say, every point has to be very specific, very well tooled. You don't have to deliver it exactly verbatim as you write it down. But if you don't write it down, you don't come up with those clear ideas in the
Right.
interview.
Yeah. And I think that preparation, that's where preparation really comes in. So those of you who are thinking that maybe you'll need, it's better for you to memorize things, is better, knowing is better than memorizing.
Yes.
I had to actually teach my oldest son that when he was in high school, that he was becoming much more independent and working or doing his homework and things like that. And says, stop, don't concentrate on memorizing, know it. And you know all the moving parts that go
Right.
towards it. You can't just say that I want to have a bigger bicep without understanding what the function of the bicep
That's so
is.
true. Not memorizing it, but it's creating a script and then learning it, making it
Yeah.
your own. Yes. Then you have a flow of ideas that you can deliver in that meeting.
Yes. So hold up the book again, Julius.
Okay.
The Job Seeker Script. It is available for you to get right now. It's a hardcover. It's very detailed about how to draw up these narratives so that you can be prepared for your next job interview, for networking possibilities, and just really even to write the next email. I think that might be integral to getting your opportunity. Those things will really help. Thank you so much, Judith, for joining me here on the Voice of Job Seekers. I surely appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark, for having me.
For the rest of you, thank you very much for joining me. And you should be able to hear it on the podcast in the next few weeks. But other than that, you can go to YouTube, find my channel, and you can go to and watch the video if you just missed it. For the rest of you, again, thank you and peace in the valley. Love.
Thank you.